Hello, all. Welcome to the HOJ-Cast episode 23. For episode 23, we're going to be talking about something MJ related, Michael Jordan related, of course, although there will be a very brief recognition of the other player that I collect who wears number 23 at the tail end of this episode. I'm not going to do a big overview of all the topics that we're going to get into because I'm just going to plow through them, but you can expect that there's going to be Michael Jordan talk. Michael Jordan card collecting. There's going to be some collecting philosophy that actually comes before it. We're going to talk a little bit about market stuff, and then we're going to conclude with a little bit of football talk. So the theme of this episode is Michael Jordan's rarest cards, and I'll justify that claim and explain what it means in due course. But first, let's warm up. A warm-up topic, if you will. I have displayed on the screen an image of the book called The Grasshopper, Games, Life, and Utopia by Professor Bernard Suits. And I have not consumed this book in its entirety, but I am familiar with portions of it thanks to some podcasts and some writings by a different professor named C.T. Wynn, I believe at the University of Utah, who has drawn on and extrapolated from Professor Suits' work. Anyway, I just want to explore a topic today to start with. It's philosophical, obviously, relates to collecting, obviously. I don't want to put forth the idea that there will be any definitive answers provided here. This is an exploratory mission, not one that even considers it likely or maybe not even possible to deliver something definitive or definitive answer to the inquiry that we're about to embark on. But nonetheless, I think it's a great topic, and I think sometimes exploring and asking questions can be just as useful, just as insightful, maybe even more so than trying to give definitive answers. I think it was Bertrand Russell who said the purpose of philosophy is to dispel certainty, to remove certainty. And we're definitely going to do more than remove it. We're going to start from the assumption that there isn't any, and then see where it takes us. So I've trotted out this idea several times. I've continued to think about it in the background. I think this has been a topic on my mind for about a year. I think I first stumbled into this idea about a year ago. And it's the idea that, to sum it up, and then maybe unpack some of its nuance, is that the purpose of life is to play games. And that, of course, sounds nonsensical on its face. How could that be the purpose of life? There are people who are performing life-saving surgeries right now as we speak. There are people who are providing relief and aid to impoverished people who need help. There are people building homes. There are people working and researching cures to diseases and ailments. And there are people who are doing very purposeful things, much more so than sitting around and playing games or collecting cards or things like this, right? So how can it possibly be that the purpose of life is games? And here's how that conclusion is reached. So Suits was very interested in the idea of utopia. And he sketches a notion of utopia that goes something like this. Utopia is when all of your needs are taken care of. So utopia preempts these incredible heroes that walk among us who save lives, perform research, and just in all the ways that people can improve the general quality of life for others. That is taken for granted. That in a utopia, we don't need to go out and gather food. It's already there. We don't need to provide shelter for ourselves. It's already there. Our health is in good standing and taken care of. We are not being afflicted by any ailments or diseases. And so once all of these needs are taken care of, once it's all settled, and this is key, once we no longer need to work, once we no longer need to exchange our labor for resources because we have enough, we have ample resources, then we're in a utopia. And Suits' inquiry is this: once we're in that utopia, if we could just fast forward in life to that part where hypothetically, if we get to it, when we're in that utopia, well, then what would we do? And he posits, and Wynn posits as well, that we would try to we would try to find value in things, and that would lead us to playing games. But now playing games, it isn't a distraction or a pastime from the stresses of ordinary life, but instead it is ordinary life. We need to fill the time, and games is how these two scholars suggest that we would do it. So if we can grant those premises, if we can imagine utopia, they argue that I think Wynne puts it best. He says basically we would either be bored all of the time, we would just be hopelessly bored, or we would play games. And once we think about that and sort of accept that that games are the thing that we would occupy ourselves with in a state of utopia, all of a sudden games take on a whole different context. Now it's not just something that we sort of aimlessly do, or that we should feel bad or ashamed about, but that in fact games are what we would do in utopia. And then Wynne and Suits sort of take it even a step further and say, if games are what you would do in utopia, if that is what you would do when all of your basic needs have been accounted for, then aren't they sort of the purpose of life? And aren't they the ultimate end of life? And so that's not necessarily something to agree with, or that we should just accept, and it's something to be thought about from angles. Sometimes on some days I'm cozier to that idea than I am on other days, but there it is. It's an idea, and I don't want to beat up or extrapolate too much from it, except just to add also that the idea of game, the definition of a game, it's important. A game is because it works within this framework that Suits established, this utopian framework. And so a game is something where we impose obstacles on a behavior or an activity for the purpose of striving to overcome them. That's the idea of a game. That so just make that a little more concrete, you have the sport of basketball where you have all these rules. It has to be played within a court that's a certain size, on a hoop that's a certain height, with a ball of a certain circumference, etc. And these rules are imposed, and then of course you have very sophisticated rule books and so on and so forth. And that's actually quite interesting as an aside, how complicated the rules of sports actually are. If you ever dive into it, it's more than sometimes I find myself taking for granted just how sophisticated rules are. And it's a credit, I think, to the casual audience, to the general public, and to the participants of those sports, that such sophisticated games. I mean, if you look at the rule books of like the NBA or the NFL or something like that, I mean, they are pretty dense and complicated, with rules referencing back to each other and stuff, and the need to apply the rules instantaneously as things happen on the fly. It's just a bit of a credit to the mental faculties of people who observe and watch and participate in and coach and officiate these enterprises. But anyway, the idea here is that games, right, whether it's the game of basketball or the game of collecting cards, that once we're in utopia, that these sort of games, maybe they're important. And it's interesting too, sort of the divide, the pre-utopia and the post-utopia divide. That sort of everything pre-utopia is working towards getting to that point when you can enter utopia. And I think very few, if anybody, ever truly enters it. I mean, there's always a health concern. For the vast majority of us, like myself, we work, we trade our labor and our efforts for resources so we can continue to provide for ourselves. So we're far away from a utopia, perhaps. But as a thought experiment, it's instructive, and it sort of paints the picture of everything pre-utopia that we do is sort of building towards, graduating towards getting to that utopian state where suddenly we find ourselves in a position where either it's playing games or being bored. And so that brings to the front the game of collecting, the point of collecting. How does card collecting sort of what can we learn from this utopia thought experiment? And one of the things that occurs is this is a bit of a preamble. It's not the main point I want to make, but this helps sort of explain or put into a different light, that in a way that I haven't quite seen before, the divide between the camp who is really genuinely not interested in the value of cards versus the camp that is. And there's nothing that I suppose hypothetically in utopia you could still take a great concern about the value of cards, but you don't need the cards to be valuable to provide anything for yourself. But instead, the value of cards can be thought of as sort of a proxy for sentiment, or as a tool to exchange that value for something else of value that you might like. So it's not that value becomes irrelevant in utopia. There's still plenty of utility for it, but in the pre-utopian sense, value takes on this extra pressure. It's this the value of cards has this extra burden. It has to do more heavy lifting, and that is that these cards become pieces that get exchanged for things that actually help you improve the state of your life, and that might even become necessities as functions of a person's net worth. That these things are counted on to sort of be there as reserves, or things that can help a person provide for their needs if ever that should arise. And so in that sense, collecting cards isn't a pure game. In the pre-utopian world, if we're relying on the value of cards to sort of provide for ourselves, it's sort of attached, it's wrapped up in our work and our labor. It's that these cards are items of exchange that are helping to provide our basic needs, that are helping us hopefully reach the utopian state one day. And so in that sense, cards aren't they're just not a pure game. And the purist approach, who's seeing the art of collecting cards is purely a game, they're taking a more utopian approach. I think that they're sort of seeing things as like this is how we would do cards in a utopia. And so they're sort of card collecting as a utopian practice for them. It's even if they haven't established a state of utopia in their own lives, but they carve out a few hours a day or a few hours of the week where they do live, or they mimic the conditions of a utopia. And card collecting in the utopian context, it takes on a different dimension. It does. Suddenly we're not counting on the value of these cards to provide basic needs for ourselves. And so in the utopian game framework, how would that change, if at all, the way that we collect cards? I think that's an instructive thought experiment. It's sort of related to the thought experiments I posed an episode or two ago, or I can't remember how many episodes ago it was, where I sort of said, imagine, and I won't rehash the whole thought experiment here, but imagine that every card ever made was on a table in front of you, and you could pick up just one. Which one would you take? And then if you could pick up multiple and stuff, and like there's a lot of wrinkles and nuances to that. So please, if that's foreign to you, I think you might get it, and you like this, I think you might get a kick out of listening to that prior episode. But anyway, there's a little injection, a little warm-up topic, drawing on the work of C.T. Wynn and Suits professors who had things to say about games. And anyway, that's a topic that I'll continue to come back to and explore further. That's an introduction to it, and something to think about. Here is the next topic here. So sort of building on this idea of collecting as a game, and I'm not saying that we need to see collecting as something that can only take place in the utopian context of games, or that we need to see it as necessarily a something that's related to our work, or that something that's helping us at some point in some way, conceptually if not practically, providing for ourselves. But in either case, in either way we approach it, but especially if we are approaching it as a utopian game, there's so many interesting wrinkles in the game. And one of them that I've been thinking about lately, that's been really on the top of my mind, is that so I've sort of come to a conclusion, and it's a malleable conclusion. It evolves and it changes, and I'm always, but increasingly more lately, but I've always been constantly thinking, what is the end goal of collecting? What is, I'm always trying to collect and to optimize for the game of collecting. I'm always trying to do the very best I can to play that game as effectively as I can, because I think that's, just like any other game, like with basketball, I would enjoy basketball the most if I was maximally performing at my highest level within the rules of that sport. Like the point of that game is to put the ball in the basket and to prevent the other person from doing it within the confines of the rules. So the more that I'm doing that, the more that I'm putting the ball in the basket, and the more I'm preventing the other ones from doing it, the more I'm succeeding within the confines of that game. And so I'm constantly thinking about what are the confines of the game of collecting, and there's art, there's artistic license there, that we all sort of get to say for ourselves what the rules of that game are ostensibly. Although I do constantly try to investigate and think about what might actually be the objective rules to this enterprise, if there were some. Like for the sport of basketball, with some of the objective is to score points. Well, what is it for collecting? That's sort of that thought experiment that I had earlier about the table of cards. Sort of maybe that can help us figure out what the end aim of collecting is. And so within this world, or this context of trying to identify the end goals, or the end game of collecting, I stumbled into something recently, and it's something that I get a reminder of from time to time, which is that with collecting, with mail days, with acquisitions, with adding pieces to the collection, that sometimes, maybe all the time, that a card needs to be added to my collection before I can truly understand whether I like it or not. It's a very glorified test drive, and that sometimes there are cards that just they're off the radar. They don't have a high social proof score. They haven't, I haven't ever seen them show up on a collector's page. They're just very obscure, very hidden. But then all of a sudden, like I had occasion to take some cards like this back in a trade a month ago, roughly now, and eventually maybe I'll do an episode about that trade. I have so many cards. I've just gotten loaded up on new cards this summer in a way that I never really have before, and there's so many stories to tell about all these cards, and I'm just continuously learning about them. It's been a utopia of collecting in some ways this summer for me. But one part of this trade, which I will talk about later, but I took back a few printing plates of Michael Jordan, and I am the furthest thing from a printing plate guy, or at least I was. But all of a sudden, I have these plates, and then as part of my Michael Jordan 1-of-1 research that I've been doing over the last few years, I did carve out a place in that spreadsheet document for 1-of-1s. And printing plates, some of them are numbered 1-of-1, but others aren't, but presumably are print run of one. And if they were on any of the checklist websites that I was referencing, I gave them their own section, and I found about 130 printing plate Jordan 1-of-1s up through 2009-10, which is the final season of NBA licensed Michael Jordan cards. And so Michael Jordan's full career has these checklists helped me find about 130 or so 1-of-1s, and then like 85 of them came from a 2008-09 Upper Deck flagship product, or maybe it was 09-10. Like one of the last NBA licensed Upper Deck products gave like 85 Jordan plates and tons of Jordan cards in the set. And so outside of those, there's really only about 40 or so plates. And anyway, that's at 40, it starts to get interesting. With plates, it's like, okay, well, there's 40 or so, but really everything was made from 4 plates, presumably, right? Or maybe there was even extra plates used if one plate became faulty or something. So there's certainly many more plates in existence than just these 130 or so that showed up on checklists. I obviously, like, it's interesting, like, just starting to think about it and find out. Rarity is always something that's exciting, and just finding out just how rare the population of plates for Jordan is, and then sort of there are instances. Several of the plates that I took back are instances where the plates are print runs of one, or actually these plates actually have written on them that they are 1-of-1s, and these cards otherwise have no 1-of-1 parallels. These plates are the only, and they're plates, but so they're not quite parallels in the traditional sense, but they're the only things numbered 1-of-1 that come from the same source material as those cards, let's say, or that are the source material for those cards. So that starts to make it really interesting too, when you have a plate that is numbered 1-of-1 and it's associated with a card that doesn't have any 1-of-1s. Like, that starts to make the plates a bit more intriguing as well. But anyway, I bring that up because I think it's an interesting example of where I certainly would not have ever bid on these plates at auction. I took them back to balance out the value in a trade. And then once I owned them, I started looking into them, and I already had accumulated some prior research. And all of a sudden, I find that these plates have cool stories to tell. So it's like, what is that? What is that mechanism? What is that wrinkle in the game of collecting where once we come into the ownership of something and then we research? It reminds me of a really funny comment that a collector friend of mine made when I saw him at a Dallas card show a few years ago. He was talking about a card he picked up, and he was like, "Yeah," he's like, "I bought the card, and then I did all the research to figure out what it is after." And it was just such a moment of a relatable moment of honesty, because that this trade has put me in that position. I'm not quite as cavalier to just like straight up buy something and then do all the research later, but I will take it. If I can look at comps and say, okay, this is roughly that's what that's worth, and then later I'll start diving into it and learning more about it. And it doesn't always work this way. Like there are some other pieces that I took back in that trade where once I learned more about them, they still weren't compelling. I did like them more. Like the longer that I own them and I look at them and I learn about them, I do start to like them more. My impression of them grows, but not always to the case where I feel like this piece tells a great story and I'd like to keep it. But sometimes it does. And the thing that's fascinating is that I would have never had that revelation without being required to take these items into my possession. Then once they're in my possession, I start learning about them. And so some people might be thinking endowment effect. This is the bias of ownership. But it's more than that. It's more than just I like this more because I own it. It's something beyond that. It's that once the bias of ownership has kicked in, then it triggers a research process, and it triggers a learning and a discovery phase that then gives me something more substantial and concrete to ground my bias for the item in than simply I like it more because I own it. Well, now I've lined it up with reasons. David Hume or philosophers of his ilk would sort of say that the faculty of reasoning is subordinate to the faculty of emotion or personal preference, and so that this might just simply be an expression of that ultimately at top it is the endowment effect. I own it, so now I like it more, and then I fill in the gaps for why I like it more with all this reasoning. But that would sort of be contradicted by the fact that there are other things that I own but I don't like as much, even though I do the research, and then I decide to move on from those things but not from others. But so there's this wrinkle in the game of collecting that I think has to be accounted for when I'm sort of performing that card on a table thought experiment, where it's which card would I pick up, and sort of there's lots of cards on that table that just don't have a high social proof score. What I mean by that is that they haven't ever been socially validated. Like they've never printed a comp or they don't show up on the pages of other collectors, and there's or even adjacent cards don't, or at least they've never been in my peer review of the collectors that I follow and the content that I consume. And so there is no social validation to give these items any prestige or value. And there's psychological evolutionary reasons why that social validation is important to us as humans. But they don't have it, or I haven't been exposed to the groups of people who do socially validate them, and then all of a sudden I get it, and now I'm learning about it, and all of a sudden I'm finding compelling stories to be told, and I'm in this new realm of things and suddenly they take on more value. And so that's just once again, I'm certainly not trying to give an answer to what is the game of collecting, what are its objectives. I'm going to continue to scratch at that issue and work on it, but and think about it. But this is a wrinkle in it that has to be accounted for, I think, is that we can think we have a hierarchy of cards and desires and goals and aims, and then the whole thing can get shook up when we come into possession of something that just wasn't on our radar before. And this is why I harken back to the idea that the ideal approach to sketching the outline of the game of collecting, it must require, it must be comprehensive, and it must give equal research and inquiry into every type of card. It really should, in its purest form. And I think this is a good example for why that we should be cleansed of all of our cards, and then have to really investigate what every single card is, hypothetically. And then once we've understood and really investigated what every card is, then we step into that room, we look at the table of all the cards in front of us, and we decide which ones that we'll take. So enough about that. Enough about the endowment plus effect, or something we'll call that. Let's get to the bulk of today's episode, the thing that I'm very excited about, the thing that I've been working on, thinking about for a few months now this summer. And that's sort of this discovery that I've had of Michael Jordan's rarest cards. And I advertised at the beginning that I would explain exactly what I mean by that. And so for episode 23, we'll do it. And as a way of leading up to that, to what I mean by this process, this summer of 2025 discovery of that I've gotten to take this journey, that I'm framing as my discovery of Michael Jordan's rarest cards. Very little is known about these. I knew very, very little about these, and I knew bits and pieces, but when you know a little something but you don't know the full thing, you really live in that world where you don't know what you don't know, and that's a world that can be very ominous. My goal with this project was to find out everything that I don't know, and to make sure that I've covered all my bases, or do my very best, do the very best job I can to limit the share of the things that I don't know, and that but obviously if I don't know that I don't know, that's difficult. But we try to limit that part of the matrix as much as we possibly can. So but that's I knew bits and pieces about Michael Jordan's earliest one of ones, but I certainly couldn't have told you what's the total offering, what I hadn't ever done that. And another thing is that I don't know that anybody's ever tried to do that. There are checklist websites that presumably contain this information, like finding a needle in a haystack. It's in there, but the user has to have the vision to want to pull it out and to know what they're looking for precisely, and to sit down and take the time to do it. There's not much market coverage of these cards, mainly because they don't have any sales, the vast majority of them. And there's and just generally there's no public resource, right? There's no Beckett magazine that has think pieces from the 90s on Michael Jordan's rarest cards. And it's a really, in the true sense of the word, uncharted territory. And that made it really exciting. So that's sort of the starting point here, and just bear in mind that I'm just a few months into this as something that I've been tackling with the higher levels of passion. I had started thinking about these cards about 2 years ago or so, but I've really been passionately focusing on it since about June. And so anyway, I promise here I would say, what do I mean by rarest? And so here's what I mean. It's the combination of two things. It's the combination of the shortest possible serial numbered card type, and the serial numbering is a factor here. That the manufacturer tells you exactly how many were made is a factor, and there's some nuance with that I think maybe we'll get to in a little bit later in this discussion. But I'm starting there. That, in other words, one of ones. All right, that's just cards that have that bear writing or a stamp or a printing of some kind on their surface that indicates that these are one of one, that these are the only one. So that's the first part of rarity that I'm discussing here. And then the second part that I'm discussing is that the one of one nature combined with the early appearance of the one of one card type. And so I think the one of one rarity sort of speaks for itself, right? There's one copy of it, and the manufacturer has printed on this card that this is the only copy of it, as contrasted against the second type of rarity, which is a little more conceptual and a little less and not as inherent in the physical properties of the item itself, which is chronological rarity. And chronological rarity is something I've discussed on a few different podcasts. It relates to the first, I believe Victor and I, or maybe it was Brett and I, or all of us have in some way referred to it as the doctrine of the first. And and then in thinking about what I want to say in this episode, I decided that I was going to sort of label that as chronological rarity. Chronology meaning the the temporal sequence of events, that one thing coming temporally prior to the other. And so chronology is sort of the study of the sequence of events, and in a specific, in a chronological order. And so chronological rarity is a different way of saying sort of the rarity of the first, or whether it's the first edition or the first press or something. The idea of a first is an idea that will be familiar to collectors and to people from other walks of life as well. First, the firstborn son, things like that. Like the first is a concept that has a rich history, but here, using the first as a means of identifying chronological rarity, the way that sort of works is that it's related, or it's derived from the logical dependence that subsequent issues of a type of a thing depend on the existence of the first in order for them to exist as well. So taking as an example the serial numbered 1 of 1 card type, that the first instance or the first instances of this, like if we want to cluster them by season, that the first season to have serial numbered 1 of 1 cards, every subsequent season logically depends on that first season for its existence as a conceptual type. So that, I think, is the nature of chronological rarity, is that the first appearance of something is the foundation upon which the subsequent appearances of it depend. And if these weren't the first, then the other ones would be the first, and then everything after them would logically depend on them. And so you can have a first appearance of something without a second, and then it's also the first and the last, but it's you can have it, but you can't have a second without a first, and then you can't have a third without a second and a first. But they all depend on the existence of the first, and that logical necessity that subsequent issues have, that dependence that they have on the first, is what I'm calling chronological rarity, that there can only be the firsts. Okay, this starts to get into the twilight zone pretty quickly here, but that's the idea behind chronological rarity. So I'm combining these two ideas. I'm combining the idea of the shortest possible serial numbered prints, which is the 1 of 1. I'm combining the idea with chronological rarity, or the rarity of the first, and I'm using that as the justification to say that Michael Jordan's first 1 of 1s, so combining the print rarity, the serial numbered print rarity, with the first rarity, the chronological rarity, is that those are the grounds upon which I'm saying that these are Michael Jordan's rarest cards. And then this is the process of discovering them, and then after discovery, there's something else very interesting, which is the process of creating a taxonomy. Or I've used that as a verb, taxonomizing the offering. I use that as a verb on Cajun Cardboard Show. I'm not sure if it actually functions, if the word can function as a verb or not, but it should be able to. We can understand what it means. That we're taking something, a cluster of things, and we're sorting them into types and classifying them. We're building a taxonomy of them. And so I recorded with Cajun an episode on this project last week, and it's coming out, I think, on September 30th. And so this episode, I was always going to do this episode as episode 23 anyway, but I only get one shot at 23, and so why not talk about the most exciting quest in Michael Jordan collecting I've had. But I don't mean to preempt that episode, but instead, this episode can exist as a resource for people who want to sort of dive in further after they listen to Cajun and I talk about this project. That here's a resource that maybe dives into it a little bit further. But I think Cajun did a really nice job of steering and shepherding that discussion, and keeping it accessible and interesting. Whereas I'm diving quite deep into a lot of things here. So just a different style, but anyway, so that's so the project here is being released, and here we'll put on the screen this little page that I made using a reference called Card, CARRD. It's a cool tool that let me build this little card website, and and so I've made this website, and you can access it by going to 90smj1of1s.com, all numerals where appropriate, 90smj1 numeral of 1 numeral s.com, 90smj1of1s.com. You can use that link to get to this page, which I'm about to go through. So this is the taxonomy. All right, so this is the building of the taxonomy of Michael Jordan's rarest cards, and this is something that I've been thinking about a lot, about just as an inquiry, as a threshold question. What the heck should I call it? So I'm calling this, and this is what I do a lot. Like I can't settle on one term or phrase or title or something. I throw a bunch out, and I'm never sure which one I like the most. So you can see that the website is oriented around these being 90s one of ones from Michael Jordan. And I've written on the screen there, Michael Jordan one of ones from the 90s. And I went with that nomenclature in a number of instances, but here I've titled this episode The Rarest Michael Jordan Cards. And a different way to phrase it would be Michael Jordan's first one of ones. That could be a way of phrasing this project as well. I'm not quite sure what the best phrasing is, but I think Michael Jordan one of ones from the 90s is the most modest way to phrase it, and I generally end up gravitating towards the more modest phrasing, I think. So I've gone with that, and invoking the 90s is nostalgic. The 90s was when I grew up collecting, so anyway, that's the umbrella that this project is living under on this website. At least that's how I've branded it at this time. This taxonomy, the taxonomy of Michael Jordan one of ones from the 90s. And you can see here, we're going to look at it more closely in a second, but there is a poster, or what ChatGPT helped me call it, as an index that was created by Frizzo.collects. That's FRISSO.collects. He did all of the graphic design work. He had the vision for how it should appear. He made it beautiful, and obviously he is a professional graphic artist. And he's also a 90s collector. And the way I came into contact with him was he took inspiration from Cajun cardboard's hierarchy posters, and he made his own that had a lot of overlap with the cards that Brian was tracking, but but he put his own collecting spin on it. And it's just a beautiful work. I mean, it's a piece of art. It's something that would look beautiful hanging on a wall. And he showed me the one that he made, and he expressed to me how much of a fan he was of Cajun's hierarchy and of the content that Cajun makes. And he was also sharing some excitement that I've been talking a bit about Michael Jordan cards on this podcast. And he showed me his collection, and his cards and his taste are just phenomenal. And I just asked him, I was like, this poster that you made is amazing. The stuff that Cajun's doing is awesome. This is clearly a way of organizing and presenting and just making great fodder for collecting, if we can sort of put up on a piece of paper an index, a checklist, or something. And it's a cool piece of content. And I said, if I had been, over the summer, I'd just been spending hours and hours doing all this research. And I had this Microsoft Word document that was like, I don't know, 50 pages long, that's sort of where I had gathered an image of as many of these cards as I could find. And if I couldn't find the right image, then I gathered an image of a parallel instead. Like, so some of these have gold one of ones, but none of the golds have an image. So I gathered an image of the bronze, and I just made a comprehensive list of all of these cards. And I was just doing that research for my own edification, and just to have this resource. But it suddenly something clicked in my head, and I was like, what if I showed this to Frizzo, and could you make an index out of this? Could you make a poster out of this? And of course he saw it, and he was like, yeah, I can absolutely do this. And so, but he is a professional. I did contract him to do it. I compensated him for the project. I'm going to be contracting him to do another project in the near future. I just need to complete the research again on my end. And that's going to be Nikola Jokic's rookie year one of ones, which are 38. So that's a project that's on the horizon for me, and that I will be contracting Frizzo to do. So if others are out there thinking about contracting Frizzo to do a project like this, just don't overwhelm him too much, because I have another project that I want him to do like this fall that I just haven't gotten to yet. But he did an amazing job. He did an inspired job, and I just, the talent, the visual art is just such an important component to sports card collecting. And here, this project, that just how beautiful this index looks. It's like it's its own sports card or something. It's its own thing. I can't wait. I don't have a copy in hand yet. I can't wait to have one of these hanging on my wall. And but anyway, so let's get into the meat of this. This is the taxonomy. So you can see the picture of the poster there. It's small. We're going to zoom in on it in a second, but this is the taxonomy. Let me just we'll pull up this first. So he provided me two really high quality files. One, which I just opened up, is the ability to view the index just as a PDF, and just to zoom in until my heart is content, and to be able to see everything really up close and crispy and clean. And the other thing he provided me is another PDF that is optimized or prepped for printing, that you could take to a print shop if you wanted to print it. And so I've linked to both on 90smj1of1s.com very conspicuously, in case anybody wanted to grab a copy of it that they could print, or they just wanted to have one to look at, or maybe you print from the first one. I don't know, but anyway, both exist. And so here I've zoomed in on this project here, and so top right we've got my little preamble, and here's the heart of the taxonomy. It says, this project depicts every solo Michael Jordan one of one from the 90s. In total, there are 72. The first 7 hail from 1997-98, and the remaining 65 belong to 1998-99. So that's the project here. In 72, you can see how they were tiled here on the index to look quite nice. And the thing about 72, it's a very memorable number for Jordan. That just so happened to work out that way. But 72 is the most wins that his dynasty era Bulls team ever had in a single season. So 72, one of ones of Michael Jordan from the 90s, or the first 72 Michael Jordan one of ones, if you will. But there they are. And so that's the project. And so what I've done is I've actually broken them into 6 buckets, and they naturally sorted themselves into the 6 buckets, as you'll see. But 6 is also a meaningful number for Michael Jordan. That's the number of championships that Bulls dynasty won, was 6. So I'm backing up to the 90s MJ one of ones page for a second to click on the research button, because this is going to take you to a Google Doc that walks you more carefully through the research. It's really the exact same content that's on the index, but the index is a little bit tough to sort of process through the medium of a computer screen. It'll be amazing to look at when it's displayed on a wall, and it'll be perfectly aligned. But I've taken the information from the index, because you can sort of see at the bottom of the index there's these several paragraphs and stuff, and like there's information sort of surrounding each of the cards. What does it say? And it's just I made this document as an accompaniment, so maybe sort of like a brochure or something that walks you through the research in a way that's more amenable to browsing it on your phone or on a device. And so once again, I reiterate here that the project is the 72 solo MJ one of ones. And now let's get to the 6 different buckets. And so I've given each of them a nickname. I kept it more formal on the index. I didn't use sort of the colloquial nicknames. I've used more formal language, but I've given them nicknames. I think the nicknames are a heuristic to help remember what each of the 6 buckets are. So the first one, I've called it the Lucky 7. And here's what it says. Basketball's first one of ones arrived in the 1997-98 releases. They yielded 7 total one of ones for Michael Jordan, 4 masterpieces from Flair Showcase, 2 masterpieces from Ultra, and the Power Deck one of one from Upper Deck. And so one thing that I wanted to do, I wanted to give a nickname, a very short and sweet nickname to all 72 of Michael Jordan's 90s one of ones. And so I did. So you have here, you can see the row 0, the row 1, the row 2, and the row 3. Those are the 4 Flair masterpieces. And if you wanted to give them a little bit more of a robust name to distinguish them from the base and the legacy version, if you're talking in a broader context than just one of ones, you would just simply say the row 0 masterpiece, the row 1 masterpiece. But within the context of one of ones, we actually don't need the word masterpiece. That's superfluous. So we can just simply say that. And then we move on here. So then you have the 4 Flairs and you have the 2 Ultras, and you have what I've called the Platinum Masterpiece, the 98 Greats. Now I understand that I've just contradicted myself. I just said that within the context of one of ones, you don't need the masterpiece. But I found that just calling it the Platinum, that started really getting too confusing with the Platinum Medallion. So I went ahead and distinguished it as the Platinum Masterpiece so as not to be confused with the Platinum Medallion. But anyway, we have then the Platinum Masterpiece, that's the nickname that I've given that one, and the 98 Greats. And so, the 98 Greats and the Platinum Masterpiece both come from the Ultra base set. And then finally, we just have the Power Deck, which that doesn't. There are 2 other Power Decks of Michael Jordan as well. So to distinguish them, we would call the Power Deck one of one. Relying so each of these, the other 6 takes the word masterpiece on their backside. The word masterpiece is printed on them. Here on the Power Deck is just one of one is printed on its surface. Masterpiece isn't printed. Colloquially, you could call it a Power Deck masterpiece, but quite technically and specifically, what is printed on the surface is a one of one, in distinction to the other 6, which have the word masterpiece printed on their surface. That's the first bucket, which I've called the Lucky 7. Obviously, they're called the Lucky 7 because they are the only 7 Michael Jordan one of ones in his first 7 one of ones from the first season of basketball, serial numbered one of ones. Then we have the 4 Horsemen. So now we're moving into the second season, right? So the Lucky 7, they're all just clustered together. The 4 Horsemen is something. So now once we get to the, like I said, there's 7 in the first year, there's 65 in the second year. So the second year has to get broken up into more clusters. And so here's how I broke them up. So the 4 Horsemen is this. The 98-99 marked the second season Michael Jordan one of ones. There are 3 brands that delivered a single base set one of MJ, and then a 4th brand issued a base set with multiple MJ one of ones. And so I've included the first appearing among them. So that's the idea behind the 4 Horsemen. This is the first base set one of one for Michael Jordan of all the base sets from the second year of Jordan one of ones that have a Michael Jordan one of one in them. So for 3 of them, that's extremely straightforward. You have Metal Universe. It has 1 Michael Jordan base set card. This is it, the Gem Masters. That's its nickname. And that's also the name that appears on the card surface, the Gem Masters one of one. Then you have the XPX Finite Extreme one of one. Now, Jordan does have multiple base set cards in SPX Finite, as is a hallmark of Upper Deck's products. They just love to put their base sets are much more sophisticated and complicated than traditional base sets. So Jordan has, I think, 4 base set appearances in SPX Finite, but this is the only one to take a one of one. And it's the first card in the set. It's very that, and on that, to that extent, it's very simple and direct. That this is the only one of one base set Jordan from SPX Finite, and it's simply called the Extreme. That's the name of the parallel, is the Extreme. Then we have the Purple Masterpiece. Once again, bringing in the word masterpiece just because aesthetically it feels better than just calling it purple. The Purple Masterpiece, which is the second iteration of the Platinum Masterpiece, where in Ultra in 1998-99, there was no subset to feature Michael Jordan. It was just simply a base set card, and it's purple, and it's a one of one. It's the Purple Masterpiece. So those 3, very straightforward. There's no other base set one of ones of Michael Jordan in those 3 products. And then there was just a 4th, one more base set that would contain Michael Jordan one of ones, and it's Upper Deck. And that base set actually has 50 or so one of ones of Michael Jordan total. It's the big bulk of the one of ones of Michael Jordan. And I've come to really appreciate and enjoy those one of ones and exploring the nuances of that offering. And this is part of the nuance, is that here is the first appearing Michael Jordan card in the 1998-99 Upper Deck base set. It's the game dated gold is what I've nicknamed it. The card has the theme of being game dated, and it is the gold one of one parallel to it, and it is from series 1 of that release. So there you have 4 different products and the first MJ base one of one to appear in them. which are the Gem Masters, the Extreme, the Purple, and the Game Dated Gold. Here's the third bucket. The third bucket is the 3 themes. These are 3 subsets. These are the only subset 1 of 1 Michael Jordan cards from his second year. So in the first year, he did have a subset 1 of 1. It's the 98 grades. And then it depends on how you feel about the different rows. Do you consider 1 to be the base set and 3 others to be the subset? Or how do you classify them? That's the classifying the Flair Showcase cards is very much an open question. But I think there'd be a little debate around the idea that 98 grades is a subset. That a themed subset. And effectively in the 90s in particular, subsets were just insert sets that were numbered to the base set rather than being numbered separately. So 98 grades, I don't know, probably has like 20 or so players who have a 98 grades card and they each got one. And but rather than 98 grades being numbered as an insert set, Jordan card 1 and Shaq card 2 and Kobe card 3, etc. Then instead they're numbered to the base set. They're number 150, 151, 152 or something like that. But they are very functionally similar to insert sets. And Upper Deck in 98, 99, very similar to Ultra in 97, 98, put subsets into their base set that had a 1 of 1 parallel, and Upper Deck has 3. So there are 3 subsets of Michael Jordan that have a 1 of 1, and they are Heart and Soul, Highway 99, and To the Net. And technically, I would argue that the Game Dated is a subset too, but that's a point of contention. Some people feel that even though Game Dated is themed, even though there are plenty of cards that don't carry any theme, Game Dated or otherwise, in the base set, that the Game Dated is not quite a true subset either. I think it's an open question, but to avoid controversy, I found a methodology that allowed me to put Game Dated into this group of 4 horsemen because the market certainly sees that Game Dated, I think, as belonging to this very prestigious group of the first appearing base set cards. And I was able to do it without having to say anything about theming or not theming. But when we do enter the realm of themes, these 3 subset themes here, the Heart and Soul, Highway 99, and To the Nets, they all are multiplayer subsets, very similar again in substance to inserts. I've taken a very close look at the Highway 99 set, and it's got 20 players in it. It's got MJ, Shaq, David Robinson, a few other guys. And I started digging into that because I own the Highway 99 Gold 1 of 1. And so I haven't looked as far into how many different players have a To the Net and how many different players have the Heart and Soul. I haven't looked too deeply into the construction of those subsets yet. But so the 3 themes, I've called them the 3 themes because that is what is unique to them, is that they are constituent parts of the Upper Deck base sets, but they are subsets within that base set. Then I guess we're on the 4th bucket. Here's Alphabet Gold. I've talked at length about this in previous episodes. I own multiple cards from the Alphabet Gold, including A. So the caption here is Michael Jordan's first unthemed Upper Deck 1 of 1s, described on the box as, quote, regular cards. And they come from Series 2 of the 1998-99 base set. There are 23 total. Each is distinguished by a unique action shot, an original backside caption, and a special card number carrying an alpha suffix, just meaning 230A, 230B, 230C. And then I posit that they are simply known as A, B, C, and so on, because I think that's the cleanest, easiest way to refer to them. Just you have A, you have B. And so I have A, B, C, and D, and I also have a R, S, and T, and then I have a few more that are in the trade pipeline as well. I have H. In total, I have 8 in my physical possession, and I have 2 more that are agreed in principle via trade that I just haven't taken back yet. I haven't taken physical possession of. And I'm very partial to these. These actually, coming into possession of A, kicked off my Michael Jordan 1 of 1 journey. and by way of a great collector in Japan. I've talked about that at length on other episodes, so I don't need to rehash that here. I find these to be magnificent. So unlike the game dated, these don't have any theme. These have no thematic element to them. These are just standard, or as the box called them, regular base cards. And that makes them very, very appealing to me. That these are just great action shots. And then the backside caption of each of them refers to the 1997-98 season. So these are not commemorating his full career. These are documenting his final season. Big fan of those. Then we have second year inserts. This is the fifth of the 6 buckets. The 1998-99 season brought forth a total of 31 inserts of MJ. One is the Holding Court Gold, and the other are the Quantum Golds. And so you can see here the Holding Court Gold. Holding Court is actually a 30-card set that has MJ and other players, but there's just one that's MJ only. Michael Jordan is pictured on both sides, and that is here, the Holding Court Gold. And then you have the 30 Quantum Golds. Each Quantum Gold is identified by a novel action photograph, a distinct reverse side blurb, and a specific card number. So you've got the Quantum Gold 1, 2, 3. I have 2 of these. I've got the Quantum Gold 4, and I've got the Quantum Gold 20. And these are commemorative. These do not refer back specifically to the 1997-98 season, but they refer to Jordan's career as a whole. It's a 30-card separate insert set, numbered as an insert set, and it's only Michael Jordan in that insert set. And these have just phenomenal photography. The die cutting, if you like die cutting, it's really cool. They have the same gold foil that has just this like brilliant sheen that you'll appreciate in hand. That the alphabet golds have it too. The Quantum Golds are cool. And then the 6th bucket are the checklists. So there are 4 checklist 1-of-1s that Michael Jordan has among these 72, among his 90s 1-of-1s, among his first 2 seasons of serial numbered 1-of-1 cards. And they're just it's hard to kind of come up with a cute name for these. Just checklist gold number 174, 175, 310, and 311. So series 1 of Upper Deck had 2 of these checklists, and series 2 of Upper Deck had 2 of these checklists. They feature beautiful photography of Michael Jordan, and the card design is outstanding as well. And I have 1 of these, and I just think that these are quite special too. And the one that I have is 310, which is the one that lists on its backside the alphabet gold, the 230s. So that one has a special meaning to me because I really like those 230s. So those are the 6 buckets. To recap them very quickly, you have the Lucky 7, the 4 Horsemen, the 3 Themes, Alphabet Gold, second year inserts, and checklists. And so putting them into 6 buckets, I think, helps. I hope the conceptual clustering of them makes sense. And that kind of helps separate them out and remember what they are, because you don't need to remember all 72. You can just remember 6. There's just the 6 different types. And really those 6 can be partitioned pretty smoothly as well, because you have the first years, the Lucky 7, and then you have 5 different groups in the second year. You have the first appearing base, you have the alphabet golds, you have the subsets, you have the inserts, and then you have the checklists. So that's how we've conceptually clustered that. And then I put another cool image, a different image that Frizzo created of the index. And then something I'll touch on really quickly here are the honorable mentions and acknowledgement. So honorable mention is made to these notable 90s pieces that were not included. The Heart and Soul Gold 1-of-1 with Scottie Pippen. So that is a dual card. It's MJ on one side and Pippen on the other. It's in the Heart and Soul subset, but it's only half Michael Jordan card. The other half is Pippen, and these are solo Michael Jordan cards. Honorable mention is also made to the 29 multiplayer Holding Court Gold 1-of-1s, which I had referenced earlier. And also honorable mention is made to the 8 solo Stadium Club printing plates and the 4 multiplayer Stadium Club printing plates. Those are very fascinating. So Stadium Club, it appears, is the only manufacturer who issued these printing plates in packs from the 90s. I don't know what happened to all the other printing plates. Like, where's the printing plates for these checklists and the quantum gold? So who knows? I don't. I would always be a little bit leery that they might show up one day, or that there might be, who knows. But in terms of pack issued, there are just 12 that contain Michael Jordan's image, and just 8 that are solo Michael Jordan cards. So 1997-98's Stadium Club Michael Jordan base set card and 1998-99's Stadium Club Michael Jordan base set card each has ostensibly per checklists 4 printing plates, none which are numbered 1 of 1 anywhere on their surface, but that presumably each have a print run of 1, and that just the black, magenta, cyan, and yellow, I think, are the 4 colors of them, and that each one of those 4 was pack inserted, and I've seen a few of them. There's a collector on Instagram who I've referred to in a previous episode who has one from each of those seasons, and so those are very special items. I do make a slight. I give an honorable mention. There's certainly an argument for their inclusion. There's also a separate argument that one taxonomy that I might try to tackle one day, although it's just for some of the reasons aforementioned, is a bit ominous. It would be taxonomizing the printing plates of Michael Jordan through his NBA licensed career, or maybe even after. I'm eventually going to continue documenting Michael Jordan 1-of-1s that even extend beyond the NBA licensing era. I've found that stopping now it was a good stopping point for the moment, but taxonomizing the printing plates might be a separate endeavor. But there's a case for inclusion of the printing plates here. I didn't, and the distinction that I'm able to make to preserve or to justify the exclusion is simply that they don't bear the serial numbering of 1-of-1, and that may be that certainly may be nitpicking or unfair. Like I said, I mean, I certainly see a case for including specifically the 8 solo 1-of-1s, and they would fit pretty neatly here into the group. It's just 72. And then if we brought in the printing plates, it goes to 80. So I'll leave that up to the collector if they how they feel about the printing plates. I'm warming up to them over time for sure. I think they're very special items. And then there's the 4 multiplayer Stadium Club plates, which are the team of the 90s. So there's 4 plates pack issued for the 97-98 Stadium Club team of the 90s card, which shows Jordan along with all of his teammates, but those are multiplayer cards. So those wouldn't make this index by nature of the fact that they're not solo Michael Jordan items. And then acknowledgement is also made to the 1999-2000 season, the 3rd year of Michael Jordan 1-of-1s. Straddling the decade, it falls outside of this 90s compilation. Like all MJ 1-of-1s, the 1999-2000 examples are masterpieces as well. And they are, and I own cards from the 3rd year of MJ 1-of-1s. I own cards from later years of MJ 1-of-1s too. This project certainly is not this index and this research, this taxonomy of the first Jordan 1-of-1s does not preclude my collecting interest in subsequent year 1-of-1 MJs. Just that the fact that there are 72 of these, and that there's such a nice clean break, a conceptual break, that they're the first 2 seasons. They belong cleanly and unambiguously to the 90s, and it just made for a really nice group of 72. But those honorable mentions and acknowledgments are important too. That speaks back to the comprehensiveness and the unknown unknowns of it all, that I made every effort I could to make sure to acknowledge things that might have an argument for inclusion, or that meet some of the criteria but not all, that those get acknowledged too, so that anything that's arguably a Michael Jordan 1-of-1 belonging to the 90s, if it didn't make it into the group of 72, that it is acknowledged here. And then there's a topic that unravels itself here, that is only for the nerdiest of nerds, but that I do think is worth thinking about. And let me just put the image of the big beautiful index back up here for a second while I talk about this. And I'm going to take a swig of tea. So like on these materials, I've used language, and eventually at some points in time, I might find occasion to tweak or improve the language. This is, a final draft, but the first final draft of this project. I'll probably learn things and improve it incrementally if need be. There may be typos that I made somewhere in here. Who knows? But you'll notice that in the first bucket, the first seven, the lucky seven, or as I've more formally called it on the index, first year one of ones. I say here basketball's first one of ones arrived in the 1997-98 releases, and that is a consensus opinion among collector resources that I tapped into while performing this project. But there is a card that comes from, I believe it's 1994-95 Skybox Premium, maybe, or Skybox or something. Anyway, the card I think is called it is a redemption prize card called maybe Action and Drama or something like that. And it gave out multiple prizes. So like you got this redemption item in a pack, and it had like the mail-in instructions on the back, and on the front it had a scratch off and a bunch of text like telling you what all the prizes are. And if you scratched it off, one of them presumably, according to checklist resources and marketing materials, one of them had a grand prize that if you scratched it off, it would be the only one providing the grand prize. And the grand prize was that you, or maybe a total of four of you, would get to go play Magic Johnson one-on-one, or play a basketball game with Magic Johnson. And so that card has a print run of one. It doesn't, to my knowledge, it doesn't bear any stamping or anything indicating that it's a one of one using that nomenclature and say one of one on it. It just, you would scratch it off, and that one, the grand prize, would be the only one to say you won the grand prize or you get to play Magic Johnson or something like that. And it is a redemption item or a prize item. Not in any way taking the shape or the characteristics of a base set card or a subset card or an insert set card or a patch autograph card or a memorabilia card. It's something different. It's a redemption item, and the redemption, you would have to give that redemption over to claim the prize, and then at that point, I'm not sure what would happen to that item. But it bears mentioning that that this is something with a print run of one. And so that's why the definition of what is a one of one is a topic that, once again, I don't intend to issue the final definitive statement on, but that I do intend to explore briefly here. What actually is a one of one? Because you can run into things like if you have a card that is graded PSA 10, let's say, and it's the only one graded PSA 10, well, doesn't that have a claim to being a one of one? Or if you have a base set card of a player that was autographed by the athlete, that the card depicts, and then maybe the athlete passes away or something, and it's the only copy that was ever signed by that athlete. Well, doesn't that have the claim to be a one of one? And then let me get even a little more into the weeds here. What about the fact that that different copies of cards? So this sort of is in the vein of the PSA 10, pop one being a one of one, or sort of in the vein of an autograph being added to a card, giving it a dimension of being a one of one if it's the only signed copy out there. That's what about the fact that every card is sort of on some level unique from the others? Even so cards that are that are made from the same materials but that end up being slightly different copies. Like every card is cut slightly differently. Each card is going to have slightly different concentrations of ink, different levels of fading, different levels of surface wear, different levels of edge wear and corner wear, distinctions and condition. And so each card, just like each human fingerprint from one human to the next, it has an argument of being unique. In a certain sense, any item can have a story told about it that shows that it is the only one of its kind. It just depends on how you define kind. And so I don't mean to take away from the uniqueness of any of these items either, that condition scarcity can put a card into a category of being the only one of its kind. And the addition of an autograph or a memorabilia accompaniment can put a card into a classification of being the only one of its kind. And so because of that, you can also have things that have prize cards that have a print run ostensibly of one. Or you could have to borrow a phrase from the vintage and pre-war community, you could have something with the natural scarcity or the natural rarity of just one copy surviving. That maybe 1,000 copies were made, but that's 999 of them, let's say, were destroyed or lost somehow. And there's a different version of having a print run of one, and then that item is a one of a kind in the sense that it's the only one of its type in it that survived, that exists. So one of one as a concept there are layers of depth to it that you can investigate and you can explore. And so I find that a very clean distinction, and something that I find is a property of being a one of one, is the serial numbering, is the provision of the stamp. Now, this, like I said, this isn't to say that other things aren't one of ones or one of a kinds as well, but that there certainly can be, and that they have varying degrees of strength to their claim to being a one of one. So something that has a print run of one has a stronger claim to being closer to the essence of a thing possessing just one copy than us having a couple different copies of the 86 Fleer, and me saying like mine has a slightly different century than yours, so each of ours are one of ones. And there is, on some level, technically that's correct, but we can see that there's a sliding scale here of the degree to which something is unique, even if they all are unique. And so I find that that relying on the provision of the serial numbering, that the serial numbering attaching to the card's surface makes for a pretty clean distinction, and a visible distinction, so that we don't need any extra materials. We don't need secondary sources to tell us that this is a one of one, that the card surface itself tells us that it's a one of one, but that in the instance of other items, we need some other evidence to supplement what we have in our hand when we have the card in our hand. So when I'm defining one of one, if I'm getting technical, the way that I've used one of one in the context of this project is to specifically refer to one of ones as things that are serial numbered, because we can hypothetically imagine, let's say, an evil genius, like let's take, for example, the card TakeIt2.net from Flair Showcase. Let's say an evil genius accumulates all 1,000 copies and destroys 999 of them. Now they too have a one of one, in the sense that it's the only surviving copy. So that too is a one of one, but should that make it onto this list of the 72 one of ones? And I can see an argument for it, and I don't want to discredit the uniqueness of that, like or jersey numbered copies of things like the Take It 2.net is numbered to 1,000, so number 23 of 1,000. That's a one of one in a sense. It's the only one that has that specific serial number. But in that sense, they're all the different serial numbers are one of ones. 24 out of 1,000 is also one of one. There's no other 24 out of 1,000. 25 out of 1,000 is one of one, and so on. So the distinction that I've made is that when I use the one of one, when I use the term or the phrase one of one, that it's technically referring to something that has the serial number one of one on it, which is not to take away from other one of ones that could exist, but just to make clear what the boundary is, what the definition of one of one is. And so when I say here in the explanation of the first year one of ones, or the lucky seven bucket, when I say basketball's first one of ones arrived in 1997-98, that quite precisely means basketball's first serial numbered one of ones, because there is this case to be made that the prize card from 1994-95 Skybox, which grants you the opportunity to play one-on-one basketball against Magic Johnson, which today would be quite the treat if you could go out on that yacht with him wherever he's like sailing off the coast of Croatia or something. It could be pretty fun. There's a question for you. Would you rather keep that? Would you rather keep that that prize card, would you rather redeem it for a trip to Magic Johnson's yacht? I'd rather keep the card, because that card certainly does have a story to tell. As I think the cleanest story that card could tell is that it's the first basketball card that was manufactured to have a print run of one. I believe that's accurate. So, but that's really into the weeds for the nerds there, and that's also to once again display the extent to which I've dedicated myself to being comprehensive. So that's been a walkthrough of the taxonomy, this taxonomy project that I've been up to, and that has been just an incredible amount of fun for me to pursue. All right, so let's look at an application of this that derives from my collecting endeavors this summer. And let's just like we did in the previous episode when we went through a Mahomes social media post that I made. Let's go through the social media post that I made after that, and let's grade and critique how I presented this card and how I told its story. There are several parts of this that already make me cringe that I wish I had did differently, but we just have to put ourselves out there and try things and then learn. And so I'd like to sort of walk through a criticism or a review of how I presented this card, and you may recognize it from the index, from the taxonomy project. This is the Power Deck 1 of the Lucky 7, and it is. I've talked about this quite a bit when I did the episode on the trade, the trade that I made with the great Stanley, and a follow up on that. So Stanley took back my Molten Metal Fusion Titanium, which then he ultimately turned into a PMG Champ out of 50, which is a card that he had been coveting for many years, just like I had been coveting his Power Deck for many years. And we both were able to maneuver and get to the card that we wanted. And so the Power Deck belongs to the Lucky 7. It belongs to the first year of serial numbered basketball 1-of-1s. It belongs to first year of Michael Jordan 1-of-1s. It's just one of those 7. So it's a card that it's beyond an honor to own this card. And so let's see how I told the story of this card, because this card, make no mistake about it, this card is an obscurity. As we talked about in the previous episode, Beckett misclassified this card as belonging to 1999-2000, despite the many materials that we'll go through right now that could have been consulted to identify that the card actually belongs to 1997-98 flagship Upper Deck. And when Golden listed this card at auction half a decade ago, they misclassified it as well. And even Trading Card Database has a slight misclassification of the card, because they list it as a card with a print run of 1, which is correct, but they also designate when cards have a serial number 1-of-1. And as you can clearly see, this card has a big black 1-of-1 insignia on its front side, quite visible. So even they have misclassified it. And so, this card, like, Beckett doesn't quite know what it is. Golden didn't quite know what it is. Trading Card Database is quite close to knowing what it is, but not with 100% accuracy. So, it's incumbent upon me to tell its story, and let's see how good of a job I did there. And so you'll see a part of the story is me telling my own personal connection to it as well. So here goes. Here's how I open the post. My favorite card type is the 1-of-1. I've always loved serial numbered cards, but 1-of-1s are the most exciting to me. The 1-of-1 is the rarest possible card. It feels like something I shouldn't be able to have. The first cards to bear the 1-of-1 insignia launched a new era of collecting. Every 1-of-1 that comes after stands on their shoulders. I've already talked through, I think, all of these concepts. But there's an allusion to chronological rarity, but the serial numbering cards always gave me a jolt of excitement. Even when I first came back and I was contemplating trying to afford a Michael Jordan card numbered to 250, and the fact that it was numbered was just so riveting to me. I've always been fascinated by serial numbering. That's something that's visceral to my collecting approach. And then 1-of-1s are the peak of that, in my view. Okay, so anyway, I continue. The athlete I admire most is Michael Jordan. His 11 total MVPs are unmatched. He's got the highest box plus minus of any player with a completed career. He is the face of 90s basketball cards, the era that I grew up collecting. So I've made a triumvirate here. a three-pronged approach. And I've given you a brief paragraph about each of the three prongs. First, I love one of ones. Second, first one of ones are particularly special. Third, Michael Jordan's my favorite player of all time, right? So now we're going to synthesize, bring together those three things. Here's where I think I made my first mistake in this post. But what I said here is, pictured here is one of the first one of ones ever made, the Michael Jordan Power Deck one of one from 1997-98 Upper Deck. And the reason why I think I made a mistake is that I just don't think that the right tagline for this card is simply one of the first one of ones ever made. I don't think that that is the story of this card. I think it's part of the story. I think it's a way to tell the story, but I think I took too modest of an approach right there. And I think that there are better taglines that this card can have than simply it's one of the first one of ones. So if I could do it over, I would come up with a better tagline. But I'm also not. I don't hate that tagline. It's modest. It's trying to build up and tell a story that has nuance and sort of give a headline, but that's not too pumpy, not too that's not exaggerating. But I think I erred too much on the side of unexaggerating. I think I could come up with a better tagline. I think the card deserves better than that tagline. I continue. The first basketball cards numbered one of one emerged in 1997-98 sets. That was also Michael Jordan's final Bulls season. He has 7 cards bearing the one of one mark in these sets. 6 are base set parallels, 4 from Flair and 2 from Ultra. The other, the Power Deck one of one, is an insert from Upper Deck. Thus, this card is MJ's first insert one of one. It's also the only playing days one of one insert from his Bulls career. It is the rarest insert from his Bulls career. Okay, now that's bold. That is a bold, strong caption for the card. But one wonders, is it just a bit convoluted? This card is MJ's first insert one of one. So there's 4 levels here to this. There's 4 layers. It's the player, Michael Jordan, that's a layer. It's a one of one, that's a layer. It's an insert, that's a layer. And then it's the first insert one of one, that's a layer. So that it's a bit convoluted, but probably not too much, especially not for fans and collectors of Michael Jordan. Inserts are quite important to the Michael Jordan offering. They are they're highly sought after among 90s collectors in general. And so like they're and one of ones are are quite in demand as well. So it's bringing together, and Michael Jordan's in demand, and the first of it all. But I tried to simplify that concept as much as I could. But at the end of the day, it's something that needs explanation. That it needs somebody who's a bit more of a sophisticated collector who can appreciate all of those things. But maybe the simplest way to sum it up is just that it's the rarest insert from his Bulls career. Now that's something that I think can start to resonate with even an entry level collector or somebody who doesn't know much about Michael Jordan cards or care about them. Oh, this is Jordan's rarest insert from his playing days, or to be more precise, from his Bulls career. That's probably the strongest way to put that. The post continues. The Power Deck one of one is also the first Upper Deck one of one of any sport, athlete, or set. To wear the title of Upper Deck's first one of one would be noteworthy for any player, but it is particularly meaningful for Michael Jordan, as he has been an exclusive spokesperson for Upper Deck since 1992. So now here's a different angle on it. The first Upper Deck one of one, period. I have asked dozens of people what they think is the best tagline or approach to this card, and they've all been Michael Jordan collectors, granted. But they've all said that the strongest appeal is to just simply say, this is one of Jordan's first 7 one of ones. This is one of the lucky 7. They have pretty much, as a consensus, said that that's the approach. Now, I really like the first Upper Deck one of one approach. I think that approach speaks to people beyond the Michael Jordan collector base. That Upper Deck is a well-known brand within card collecting. Upper Deck has manufactured, for example, Exquisite. So they have the highest public sale on the public record is a card that's manufactured by Upper Deck, and Upper Deck's legacy continues to this day with its production of Hockey and Goodwin and Metal Universe and more products. And Upper Deck also, has a strong legacy going back to the very early 90s. And it sort of debuted on the scene as making its mark as a more premium offering among the offerings that were available at that time. And it's always had a unique approach to how it constructs base sets with all the different subsets and stuff. And it's a really cool manufacturer and a very meaningful one. And so for this to be the first Upper Deck one of one period, of any player, and for that to have meaning by connecting back to it being of Michael Jordan, who's been their spokesperson since 1992, I find that to be a really cool tagline, and I've used that tagline to share. And sort of the tagline, the interesting approach by that tagline is this: people can look at this card and they can see 1997. And they can, on its PSA cert, and they can see the one of one stamp, and they can see the action shot of Jordan, and they can see the cool design elements, and they can sort of think to themselves that they can know right away, okay, this is a very rare Michael Jordan card. And then visually the card is telling them all that without me having to tell it to them. And then if I come over the top and my caption is very simply the first Upper Deck one of one ever made, I think that plays pretty cool together. But it also sort of leaves open the question of like, why are you telling the story of this card as being Upper Deck's first one of one? Does this mean that Michael Jordan has tons of one of ones before it, and that the best angle you can take is to say that this is the first Upper Deck one of one, but really there's all these Fleer one of ones and Skybox one of ones before it and something? So I think it also can lead to that further questioning and confusion. And if that was true, but that would be one thing, but it's not. But so I may be doing a disservice to the story of the card by focusing on that element of it. But anyway, so I continue on here as we reach the end. So now I'm shifting to describing the card's aesthetics. The front of the Power Deck one of one shows MJ gliding for a layup in Game 5 of the 1996 playoffs, the night he waved goodbye to Spike Lee while closing out the Knicks. Its design integrates the one of one mark in the top left. The card's back is a CD-ROM containing audio content involving MJ. It has never been heard, and it never will be. So when I was having ChatGPT provide me some feedback on this caption, it was like, that's a little strong, but I stuck with it. I still wanted to say that it's never heard and it never will be, because I'm never going to listen to this. I'm never going to pop out that centerpiece. I'm never going to put this in a CD player and listen to it. I never am. So I think that's part of the lore of this card, is that it never will be listened to. And then I finish up by saying, with the help of Frizzo Collect's incredible graphic design talents, we've created a resource for those looking to learn more about about MJ one of ones. It can be found at the link. I'll share more about this soon. This is me sharing more about it, as I said I would. So let's just flip through now the carousel of images. So I put an image of the box, which is cool. This is a point that Adam Gray, the Real 27 guy, pointed out when he did a reel about the trade between Stanley and I, that the box cover has this special stamp that advertises Upper Deck's unique Power Deck audio IP, and that and it advertises the fact that there are 3 different levels of the Power Deck and that there's just the one of one. So it's cool that the stamp was a part of the box's art. Then I take a little clip from the research page to show the lucky 7 cards and the Power Deck being one of them. Show a cool picture that Frizzo took of the index. Here is a promotional card that Upper Deck used to explain what the Power Deck Audio is. Power Deck Audio is the revolutionary trading card you can listen to on your audio CD player, found only in packs of Upper Deck Series 2. 3 exciting insert levels: black jersey, red jersey, and white jersey. Only one available. Then I grabbed an image of all 3 of the MJ Power Decks, the black jersey, the red jersey, and the white jersey, and I do think they look really cool together. I think all 3 of them look awesome. And then I've got Nathaniel Butler, who was recently interviewed by Brian Cajun Cardboard on his channel. Here is a photo by Nathaniel Butler capturing from a different angle this exact shot. And then here is the video imagery of this shot from that Game 5 of the game where he would wave goodbye to Spike Lee. Here is the video of it slowed down. Jordan performs a crossover, slices into the lane. Ewing comes over to try and contest, but Jordan is just too graceful. Slides by him and floats the ball off the backboard to make a layup. Here is Jordan performing that wave goodbye to Spike Lee, who is outraged. And this is a little ChatGPT artwork where I had it recreate from scratch the Power Deck Audio and the Upper Deck logos, just put them together. That's just a little vibe. And then finally, an image from the work with Frizzo showing the index. Okay, So and then one last thing I wanted to do here is just look at a few comments that were insightful. So like I like this one from Brett Stacking Slabs, who said, "Thanks for sharing your story about this card." And I replied back to him that that's what we do. We tell stories. And I said, your flagship episode today gave me the nudge to post this card tonight. So I sort of been like wondering, when should I post this? I've actually been thinking about how I wanted to post it, gathering pictures. I spent more time posting this card than I ever posted any card in my life, because I thought it was very important that this is the first time this card story is really being told in depth and in the context of the Michael Jordan 90s One of Ones project and everything. I just wanted to tell it right. And then Brett put out an episode that sort of was talking about telling the story of cards and so on and so forth. And it was a great episode, and it just gave me the nudge to want to put it out. I love this comment from MK. He says, the greatest oddball card ever. And I don't know about it being the greatest, but it is an oddball or an obscurity or a very rare and unknown card. And but he collects those types of cards, and there's a surprisingly robust group of people who do. And I just think that that in some ways that's almost the highest compliment that he could give to a card. So I really enjoyed it, coming from him in particular. I really enjoy some of the banter about like the audio on the card. It is a curiosity, and the fact that that people are just like myself intrigued by what it said, what audio might be on this card. That's why I'm never going to listen to it, or at least that's part of it. Let's see here if there are any. I love this comment too. There's great comments from lots of friends and associates and great collectors. I love this one from a Utah Jazz fan who says, I heard if you play that disc backwards, it says I pushed off, which is great. That's some great Jazz Bowls banter that we enjoy here. This is something good from Card Channel, who says, it took courage to reveal the trade. And I applaud you guys, or I applaud you for that, Chris. This is a great acquisition. Only the real ones know how unique this is. Sort of pointing out that it took courage to announce that I had traded one of Michael Jordan's most coveted 90s inserts, which is the Molten Metal Fusion Titanium out of 40, to take back this power deck and several other cards, which I discussed on a previous episode. I don't know if there's any really any more comments that I specifically wanted to home in on. I was glad to see that the storytelling angle of it resonated with people. And there's one comment. Yeah, here's one last comment I want to get to. So this came from my friend Kyle, who said the CD-ROM audio is quite fitting for you, which it is, right? Because I worked professionally as a music producer for a decent 7-year chunk of my life, as that was my main job, and then I worked part-time doing it while I was a student for years further, and then now I haven't gotten in the studio in years, but definitely the audio component is fitting. So I still have a few more topics I want to get to as I take a swig of tea here and just pause for a few seconds. I did advertise that we talk a little bit of market, and so let's do it. I'd like to recommend The Hobby with Cage, episode 249, which is called Behind the Scenes of a Bull Market, or Is It Really a Bullshit Market? And we, Josh and I talked about this last night on the crossover. So I don't want to rehash content. And then I also wanted to encourage people to listen to A Call to Auction Houses and Why the Landscape Has Changed, an episode from the Real 27 guy on YouTube, Adam Gray. And both of those episodes are sort of making a similar point, which is that price results, comps, can be manipulated in a number of ways, but the way that they specifically focus in on the manipulation of comps is that prices can be printed and those prices can be paid. And you might ask yourself, well, people are paying record high prices for a specific card, so clearly they really want that card, and that's a reflection of their increasing demand, and that's not quite what could be afoot. There you can hypothetically imagine that if somebody had multiple copies of a card or of a very similar adjacent card, that they could go out of their way to overpay relative to what the market is today for a card in order to try and create momentum and the perception that the price is rising. And even if they're paying a high amount, an outlay that is above what the market would demand, that the hope is that this comp and this creates momentum and it increases the price of their other holdings, such that the net gain in their other items outweighs whatever the overpay was in the initial item. And then there's both these guys go into more depth and sort of analyzing how this process could be achieved, how it impacts repackers, how it impacts cards that have really inorganic price spikes that are just tough to believe, cards tripling, quadrupling, quintupling over the span of a brief period of time. And they don't make any specific allegations or accusations against any particular card or any particular situation. They just are sketching the hypothetical so that buyers can have the opportunity to introduce caution into their own reviewing of the state of the market. And I certainly heed that advice myself. And I just think it was a tremendous reminder and a very thoughtful walkthrough by both. And it was amusing that they both put out very similar episodes at the same time. It's amusing and instructive that the people are having these observations, and these concerns and these skepticisms. And it speaks to so Adam uses a phrase that I think is quite good. He says buying comps. And so sort of the reason why his episode is a call to auction houses to increase fees, which is like, that's tough. It's like, do you really want, as a seller, you don't want auction houses to have higher fees, but he makes a utilitarian point, which is in service of the greater good, that if it's more expensive for people. So he envisioned a very specific situation where somebody has consigned their own card and they're having a friend buy it, or they're buying a friend's card, or even they're buying their own card if they can dupe the marketplace into allowing them to do that. And that's, sure, that let's say the card's worth 10 grand, but they bid it up to 20 grand and then they buy it. And so, they end up taking their own card back, and they have to eat the fee. But the idea though being that whatever the cost is to them, that it can be overwhelmed and overcome by the gains that they get by buying this comp, by purchasing this comp. So this phrase of buying the comp is a good phrase, and it points to the idea that a price being printed, even one that is consummated, and even it could be a purely arm's length transaction, but that's still that a price printing, it can be done for the purpose of raising or creating momentum or raising the value of other adjacent or similar items. And that in that context, it's wise to think about that possibility anytime a price is printed, and to think about that. And it led me down a path of a particular thought experiment myself, which is like, we've certainly seen cards that have doubled, tripled in value over a month or so. And if it were me, the buyer, and I'm looking at this card, a particular copy of a card, and the card was available to me a month ago for $500, and I wasn't willing to pay $500 for it a month ago. And now the card's $1,000. Why would I be willing to pay $1,000 for it now? It was available to me a month ago for $500, and now it's $1,000. That's the cheapest I can get it. Why would I pay the $1,000 now when I wasn't willing to pay the $500 before? Now, there are reasons for that. We can imagine why people might do something like that. People can learn new things about a card. They can have a discovery or about some property that this card has that they didn't know, or they can get worried that, maybe they didn't want to spend $500 on it a month ago because they thought that maybe, I can just get that card later. But then it turns out that, the price is running, and now I'm worried that next month it's going to be $1,500. So if I really want this card, I better get it now for $1,000, or else I might never be able to get it for this cheap again. These however realistic these thoughts are, these thoughts do start to enter one's mind. And I'll use that to sort of tie this back into a theme that's been running throughout this episode, which is comprehensive knowledge. So one way to guard against this happening, so remember, the point I made was that it is possible that I could suddenly want a card more at $1,000 than I wanted at $500, but something had to materially change in my understanding of that card. Something had to materially change in my knowledge of the situation. And so one way to guard against this is to have as much comprehensive knowledge as possible as early as possible in our collecting endeavors, so that these situations where now the knowledge changes, that we learn something that we didn't know before, that we minimize the likelihood of that happening and then inducing us to end up paying more for something later than we would pay right now. That is one of the main advantages. That's the distinction, or the comparison, or the contrast that I'll set up there, is comp culture versus research culture. Comp culture is when the price is circular. The price is the value of the card, and the value of the card is the price. And if the price goes up, then the desirability of it goes up. And if the price goes down, then the desirability of it goes down. That's circular. The price is informing the value, and the value informs the price. And there's nothing that can break that. And so that allows for the printing of prices to, if a person's main input in their decision-making process is, well, what's the price of it? That I use price to determine hierarchy, and I want the best cards. And so if one card starts shooting up in price, it becomes a better and better card, and then I want it more and more. That's a circular form of reasoning. Its premises and its conclusion are the same thing. The antidote to that, the contrast to that, is research culture, where we can look independent of price. We can look at all the different properties of cards. We can look at how cards are related to each other. We look at the full menu, the full constellation of card offerings. We decide within our game of collecting, our approach, we decide which cards within that game that we think are the best, with full, complete knowledge. That we review which ones are most appetizing and appealing to us, not from a place of ignorance, not using comp culture and the circular reasoning problems that exist there, but instead using our own research-based approach, and an approach that needs a comprehensive survey of the landscape, and that we then make an informed ranking, and an informed list, an informed pursuit. That we define the outcome of our own game. And then when we do that, it will be very difficult for us to ever be in a situation where we were ignorant about a card that we liked at $500, and then suddenly we learn a bunch, and now we're having to pay a bunch more money for it. Ideally, our knowledge of the collecting landscape would be so complete that just wouldn't be a possibility. That we would understand where that card ranks in relation to our collecting pursuits, and we would buy it at $500 if we thought that it was a special, if it was a special enough card to us, but not that we would wait for the price to run away and then we become suddenly susceptible to FOMO. Now there is a nuance there. That's even my research-driven approach is the approach that's a counter to the comp-driven approach. That even the research-driven approach, something that the research approach has to take into consideration, because it is part and parcel of the humanity of collecting, of the cultural, of the community-driven aspects of collecting, is that we do care about what other people think too, and what other people think is going to influence us. It's part of our dynamic. We aren't feral. We aren't feral beings living in isolation in the woods, never seeing other human beings. We interact with other human beings. We socialize, and we actually socialize and interact to incredibly great extents. And so the socialization aspect of it all, what will people think if I show up with this card? What do other people think about this card? Those aspects are a part of the decision-making calculus too. And the markets can seem to be a really good proxy for that. And it would be if the market was a completely organic place. But so what I say by the market being a good proxy for that, it means like if the market was perfectly representing true collector sentiment about the desirability of items, but that's not, and like the market can start to approximate that, and it becomes a feedback loop, as I've already discussed, sort of the circularity of comps and value. When those things are devoid of research and thought in advance. but the research project, it's not divorced from the sentiment of the community and from our fellow collectors. And so that's where it becomes tricky. That's where comps still can be influential on us, and comps can start to feel like that maybe the community is moving in a direction without us, and that we want to make sure that we're part of it, and that there are evolutionary bases for why we would want to be a part of that. So, it's subtle, and it's tricky, but the fact of the matter is that that the markets can be manipulated. That sometimes and that's sort of the mechanism that enables it to work, is that people can start staging the market to look like it's reflecting community sentiment, and really it's not. It's just a few people who are trying to position something as becoming much more important suddenly and rapidly. But then buy-in from the community and from collectors, if they do become persuaded by it, then now suddenly the thesis becomes the reality. They're the project that they're undertaking to position something through the mechanism of printing high prices as making it seem more important. It can work, and so anyway, I do think that I think a lot about what's the antidote to the circularity of comping and value. And I think that it is comprehensive research, that it is equipping myself with the full knowledge of the total offering of cards, and doing my best to come to a conclusion about how I position and desire those cards, independent of any machinations that might be happening within the market, especially, as I have an image of on the screen, in a bull market. Because a bull market is a very fertile ground for FOMO, which is fear of missing out, and for runaway pricing in inorganic markets. And let me just tell one story of my own before I completely conclude this topic. And it is the 1996 EX2000 Star Date 2000 Kobe Bryant. This is a rookie year insert, and its chart is fascinating. So this card, as of today, has a population of 98 and a PSA 10, which is, I think, by most accounts in the hobby, that would be considered low pop for a PSA 10, especially for a rookie year issue from the mid 90s of Kobe Bryant, one of the most beloved athletes in the history of professional sports. Plus, people really like how the card looks. It has that outer space theme that characterizes the 90s, is very popular in the 90s. So here there's a lot of factors lining up for this card. And prior to late 2020, this card sold for about $1,000, never higher. In 2018 and 2019, it was $150. By late 2020, it's $10,000. By early 2021, it's $40,000. And this is the organic curve that Cage talks about. If you just ignore all this stuff to the right of the peak and just pretend that we were here in March of 2021 and this card had just run up to $40,000, and it's just this very steep slope here. That's what I think. That's what Cage means when he sort of talks about inorganic price curves. And so, and at this time, I firmly remember seeing pronouncements that this card, reciting all the points that I had made there about it's very low population, it's rookie year, it's beautiful, it's Kobe, it's a PSA 10, and then the slaughter followed, and immediately the card started dropping 30K, 20K, 15K, 10K. By 2022, we're sub 10K. By late 2022, we're down to 6K. By 2023, we're recording comps under 5,000. By 2024, we're stabilizing somewhere in the $4,000 to $5,000 range. 2025, here we are ticking up to $6,000, and then we're ticking up to $8,000, and now the most recent comp recorded for this card was from July at $8,000, and Kobe's index has been skyrocketing ever since then. And the card letter value on this card now is $9,600, which is just applying the change in Kobe's index since July 28th, which indicates that the index is up maybe around 20-ish% or something. So, uh, so who knows what the next copy will sell for? And I'm not trying to make the case that this card is headed towards the same bubble or anything like that. I'm not trying to make any observations about the state of the market for the card right now, but I am using it as an example of from the previous bull cycle that this card had a lot of arguments in its favor in terms of low pop, Kobe, PSA 10, beautiful card, insert, etc. And despite all of those persuasive arguments, the inorganic price action eventually corrected. Now, there's the zoom out story, which is that the card never got below 4,000, which is quite the jump from it being about $200 in 2018 and being sub $100 in 2016. And even in the early months of 2020, it was at $1,000, and then today, here it is in the $8,000 range. That the demand story for this card certainly seems to have merit. That demand certainly can be a plausible explanation for this card going from $100 to $200 to $1,000 to 4,000 to 8,000. The concern, the flag that was thrown on the play was when the card went from in early 2020. So like let's see, it hit that 40K in January of 2021. In January of 2020, just one calendar year earlier, the card was selling for $700, and that was circa the time of Kobe's tragic passing. So like comps that were being recorded for this card in the wake of that tragedy were, in the $700, $300, $400 range. April, it was recording prices around $600, and then just months later, it's at 40,000. So there's my own case study in the as an example here for food for thought. And then here's how I'm going to conclude this episode, as we can tuck this episode in under the 2-hour mark. I just feel like I'm just getting going, honestly. I just got my wind, actually, maybe like 90 minutes into this episode. I started really getting my feet under me. But I'll end the torture for you guys very soon here. So here's the final topic. Don't expect me to always recap football stats, but when my guys are doing well, I will. And in so doing, I don't. When I'm celebrating the fact that my guys are playing well, first of all, that will jinx them, and they will play terribly this weekend because I did this. But I can't help myself. It's just fun and exciting, and I like thinking about statistical measurements of athlete performance. It's one of my favorite topics, and in so doing, I end up actually highlighting all the different players who are statistically performing well, not just the ones that I like. But my two of my three active PC players, they are Mahomes, Brock Purdy, and Christian McCaffrey. Two of them are scoring quite well on a few different metrics. So the first thing I have pulled up here is through the first 2 weeks, or for a few players through the first 3 weeks, because a few guys played Thursday night. Here are the PPR points per game leaders at the running back position, and RB1 is Christian McCaffrey. Knock on wood, he hasn't been injured, and actually he's still ramping up from his injury, and he's being completely targeted by defenses because George Kittle is out, he's tight end 1, Brandon Ayuk is out, he's wide receiver 1, and last week Brock Purdy was out, QB 1, plus there are injuries along their offensive line as well. So the defense can really just concentrate on him, and still he is leading the NFL. He is RB1 in fantasy at 22.95 PPR points per game. Really close behind him is James Cook at 22.83 fantasy points per game, and he has 3 games under his belt. Then we get to Javonte Williams with 22.7. That's sneaky that Javonte is up there in the top 3. Bijan Robinson, nobody's surprised to see him, or Jonathan Taylor rounding out the top 5. Those are 2 fantasy studs. Devon Achane is in 6th, who looks really good in the games I've watched. Chuba Hubbard in 7th. He's a sneaky fantasy guy. I've drafted him for a few years in a row now. I became familiar with his game when he was the backup for Christian McCaffrey, when McCaffrey was in Carolina playing for the Panthers. He's pretty good. Saquon Barkley, Travis Etienne, and Jahmyr Gibbs there round out the top 10. And then at the level of quarterback, okay, RBSDM is asking me to refresh the page. We're not going to, because that's going to cause a big problem. Even though this is even though this infographic is gray, I can still clearly read it and dictate it to you guys. By the way, RBSDM stands for running backs don't matter. So I love this stat website because it's the only one I'm available of that feeds me raw EPA data, and it does it on a box score level and it aggregates it. And anyway, the reason why I'm showing this page is because there's Brock Purdy, even though he has missed a week. So he's only played one game. And in his box score stats don't look that impressive from that game because they don't tell the story of how impressive he truly was, but EPA does. And EPA standing for expected points added. It's probably the greatest single number statistic in football, and especially for evaluating quarterback and offensive and defensive team performance. So if you're not familiar with it, it's worth taking an hour this weekend and learning about it. Brock Purdy, he is the leader in the NFL in EPA plus completion percentage over expected composite. Purdy's first, Jared Goff is second, thanks to the privilege of being able to play the Bears defense. Lamar Jackson is third. Jordan Love is fourth. Josh Allen is fifth. Daniel Jones is sixth. Herbert is seventh. Drake May is eighth. Jalen Hurts is ninth. And Matthew Stafford is 10th. That's a very interesting list of quarterbacks. That's all I'm going to say for now, because I'm really rushing to get this in under 2 hours. On the EPA per play level, Lamar Jackson is first, 0.438 EPA per play, but Purdy is hanging out in second at 0.411. Purdy has the highest completion percentage over expected in the league as well. So Purdy off to a nice start. 49ers off to a nice start at 2-0. Mahomes is down to 19th in the EPA per play plus CPOE composite. So he's got some ground to gain. Both he and the Chiefs at 0-2, but I will never count out Patrick Mahomes or the Chiefs. But I'm very excited for Brock Purdy, who has picked up right where he left off with his statistical dominance, and unfortunately he's suffering from a few different injuries, but there's a chance, I guess, that he might play this weekend. So go Purdy, go McCaffrey, please stay healthy, knock on wood. Rachel Nichols sent out a tweet when there were reports from the week leading up to the season that McCaffrey didn't have a full day of practice, and that he might have there's something put him on the injury report. And she was like, fantasy drafters or fantasy owners, you only have yourself to blame for drafting him. So she called her shot, dumping on him and his forthcoming season. So I have that tweet saved, and I'm going, this is what motivates me, folks. I'm going to dunk on her, but I need McCaffrey to just finish RB1. No big deal. Just finish the season RB1, and I can fire off a tweet that will get 2 likes and nobody will care about. Thank you guys for listening to HOJ-Cast number 23. 23 is a very special episode. Christian McCaffrey also wears the number 23. And I'm thinking about making my next social media post a Christian McCaffrey card. Maybe I'll do it next week if he stays healthy through the weekend. See you guys for the next episode.